I got divorced and sold the house in Halifax, packed 2 bags, and moved to a village on Vancouver Island nobody outside BC has ever heard of. My ex-wife remarried 4 months later, big ceremony, 60 guests at a winery in the Niagara region, everything she always said we never had money for. My own son stood up there as her new husband's best man. My daughter was the only one who called me that night, not to celebrate, but to ask if I was all right. Then, halfway through the reception, someone stood up and said something into the microphone that ended the party in under 3 minutes. The video was on Reddit by midnight, 200,000 views before breakfast. 8 hours after that, my ex-wife called me, voice completely unraveling, demanding to know what I had done. I want to be clear about something before this goes any further. I'm 63 years old. I'm a retired structural engineer. I spent 31 years of my career checking whether things were built to hold weight. Bridges, overpasses, foundations for buildings people would trust their lives to. I know what a crack in a load-bearing wall looks like before it fails. I also know now what one looks like in a marriage. I just didn't act on it soon enough. My name is Walter. No, wait, people use that name already. Call me what my daughter calls me when she's being formal with me. Dad, that's enough. My ex-wife's name is Sylvia. We met in 1988 at Dalhousie. She was studying arts administration. I was in civil engineering. She was the most organized, most ambitious person I had ever sat across from at a library table, and for a long time I confused that with compatibility. We married in 1991. We had 2 kids. My daughter, who is 30 now, working as a nurse practitioner in Victoria, and my son, who is 27, a project manager with a construction firm in Toronto. For 28 years, Sylvia and I lived in a detached house in the south end of Halifax. 4 bedrooms, good schools. She ran a small events planning business, which she was genuinely good at. I worked for a provincial infrastructure firm, then consulted after 55. We looked, from the outside, like people who had figured it out. What nobody saw was that Sylvia ran our household the way she ran her events. She was the client, the planner, and the decision-maker, and I was the venue that kept quiet and paid for things. I don't say that to make her a villain. I say it because it's accurate. The budget for our kitchen renovation in 2016, $42,000, was approved by her alone. I found out when the contractor arrived. The vacation property she wanted in Prince Edward Island, she put a conditional offer in before mentioning it to me. When I said I wasn't sure we should stretch that far, she looked at me the way a teacher looks at a student who has misunderstood a very simple concept. By 2019, I was sleeping in the spare room. I told myself it was because of my back. We both knew it wasn't. The conversation that ended it happened on a Tuesday in March 2021. I came home from a site visit for a consulting contract I was doing up near Truro. Sylvia was on the phone in the kitchen. She didn't hear me come in. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was standing in my own hallway taking off my boots. But I heard enough. The tone of it. The laugh. The particular softness she used to use with me 20 years ago, now directed somewhere else entirely. I didn't say anything that night. I called a lawyer the next morning. What followed was 8 months of quiet, civil, devastating paperwork. The house was worth roughly $640,000, mortgage-free. We split the equity. The consulting income was mine. Her business was hers. We were honest with the finances in a way we had never been honest with each other, which I found grimly funny. My son took Sylvia's side. He didn't say it in those words, but he made it clear. He stopped returning my calls by September. My daughter drove down from Halifax. She was doing a locum at a clinic there at the time. Sat across from me at my kitchen table and said, "Dad, I know what's happening. I'm not picking sides. I'm just here." That was enough. That was more than enough. I signed the final papers in November 2021, and 3 weeks later, I was on a ferry to Vancouver Island with my truck, a box of books, and 2 suitcases that held everything I'd decided mattered. I rented a small house in a village outside Parksville. $1,200 a month, cedar shake siding, a view of the Georgia Strait from the back porch. My pension covered expenses with room to spare. I had $380,000 in savings and investments, conservatively managed. The first morning I woke up there, I made coffee and stood on that porch and listened to nothing in particular. A heron was fishing in the shallows. The water was very still. My chest, for the first time in years, didn't feel like something was sitting on it. I didn't know anything about Sylvia's new life for several months. I didn't look. My daughter told me only what she thought I needed to know, and she is generous enough to know that the answer to that, most of the time, was not much. It was May of 2022 when she called me on a Sunday evening. She calls every Sunday, has since I moved, and her voice had that particular careful quality it gets when she's about to say something she's been rehearsing. "Mom's getting married again," she said. I was on the back porch. The straight was doing that thing it does at dusk when it goes silver. When? I asked. September. Out in Niagara. A winery. She's been seeing this man since January, apparently. His name is Dex Carmichael. He owns 4 restaurants. Well, he says he owns them. 1 in Toronto, 1 in Burlington, 1 in Oakville, and apparently 1 more opening in Niagara-on-the-Lake this fall. I turned the name over in my mind the way I'd turn over a contractor's quote. Dex Carmichael. 4 restaurants in a high-cost market. Opening a 4th while operating 3. That's aggressive expansion for the hospitality industry, which was still crawling out of COVID losses at that point. And your brother? I asked. Silence, the kind she uses to prepare me. He's standing up for him. Dex asked him personally. He called it an honor. I set down my coffee. Watched the heron lift from the water and glide south. All right, I said. Dad, I'm all right. Thank you for telling me. After we hung up, I opened my laptop. Not out of bitterness. I want to be precise about my own motivations because I've had time to examine them. What I felt was not jealousy and not anger. What I felt was the same thing I feel when someone hands me a set of plans that don't add up. A professional unease. A need to check the load-bearing elements. Dex Carmichael's Instagram was public. 47,000 followers. Photos of restaurant interiors that looked expensive. Charity golf tournaments. A truck that changed models every few posts. My son tagged in several photos, captions like, "The man who showed me what vision looks like," and "Proud to stand next to this guy." My son, who is bright, who is good at his job, who spent his childhood watching me read blueprints, was looking at this man's exterior and not asking any questions about the structure. Ontario's business registry is public record, always has been. I spent an afternoon with it the way I've spent afternoons with engineering reports that are trying to obscure something. Carmichael Hospitality Group, Inc. Incorporated 2019. 4 operating entities, each a separate LLC. Reported revenues on public filings looked solid, combined somewhere around $9 million annually. But the picture changes when you pull the PPSA registrations. Personal Property Security Act, Ontario's equivalent of UCC filings. 2 business lines of credit at their maximums. Equipment financing fully extended across 2 of the 4 locations. A registered lien from a food and beverage distributor out of Mississauga for unpaid invoices. $112,000, filed February 2022. I kept going. Court filings, Ontario Superior Court. There was a civil action. A woman named, I won't use her name here, a former silent partner who had invested $280,000 to help open the Burlington location. She was suing Carmichael for breach of partnership agreement and fraudulent misrepresentation. Filed March 2022. Trial date set for October. October, I noted. 6 weeks after the September wedding. I sat back in my chair. Through the window, Parksville was doing its quiet evening routine. Dog walkers. One of my neighbors checking her mail. I thought about my son standing at a microphone at a Niagara winery, praising this man in front of Sylvia's entire social circle. I thought about the people in that room who might have quietly invested in Carmichael's 4th location, the one opening in Niagara-on-the-Lake. This was his pattern. Announce expansion, generate excitement, find capital among people who trust the lifestyle they're seeing, use new money to service old obligations. I called my daughter. I found some things, I said, and told her. She was quiet for a long time. Then, Dad, there are investors. Local ones. Mom mentioned at least 2 couples from her event circuit who put money in. She was excited about it. Said it was a ground floor opportunity. How much? I don't know. Probably significant. These are people who have real estate equity and RRSPs to draw on. We talked for an hour. At the end of it, she said what I'd been thinking. We can't tell Mom. You know that. She won't hear it from us. And even if she did, she'd assume it's about you. She was right. Sylvia would hear concern from me as interference. From my daughter as loyalty to her father. Neither would land. There's another way, I said. Let me be honest about what I did next, because I'm not entirely comfortable with all of it, and I think that discomfort is worth stating plainly. I have a colleague, retired now, former partner at the engineering firm where I spent most of my career. His name is, actually, in this story, let's say his name doesn't matter. What matters is that he spent the second half of his career as an expert witness in civil litigation. He's the kind of man who walks into a room of strangers and is immediately trusted because he looks exactly like the person everyone imagines when they picture someone trustworthy. Silver-haired, measured, with the kind of voice that makes people lean in. He testified in 93 cases over 15 years and was never successfully cross-examined. I called him, explained the situation, sent him the filings, the lawsuit, the PPSA registrations. He was quiet for a moment after reading them. Then he said, "This is real. I know. Your son is about to publicly endorse this man. I know that too. What do you need from me? I told him I wasn't looking for sabotage. I wasn't looking for a scene. I was looking for someone who could ask, in a room full of people who had stopped asking questions, whether anyone had thought to look at the foundation. There's a particular skill to that. Raising a doubt without raising a voice. I'd seen him do it in depositions. He could ask a question that was technically polite and leave a room feeling like the floor had shifted under them. He said he'd think about it. He called me back the next day. I know someone who does event photography for the winery circuit in Niagara. I can get myself credentialed as press. Guest list won't be an issue. I sent him everything. We spoke twice more before September. I want to be clear. I didn't script what he said. I told him the truth, and I let him decide what to do with it. My son called me in late August. First call in months. His voice was formal, the voice he uses when he's trying to perform composure. Dad, I wanted you to know I'll be standing up at the wedding. I heard. Your sister mentioned it. A pause. Dex is a good man. He's built something real. He treats Mom well. I'm glad your mother's happy. A longer pause, then. You could have tried harder. That's all I'm saying. There's a version of this where I argue back. I didn't. I've had 63 years to learn when something is load-bearing and when it's cosmetic, and my son's need to believe his mother's version of events was something I couldn't engineer my way around. Before the wedding, I said, do me one favor. Just one. What? You're a project manager. You verify subcontractors before you sign them. Do what you do for work. That's all. Silence. Then, I don't need career advice about my mother's marriage, Dad. I know. Take care of yourself. He hung up. I stood on the back porch until the light was gone. September 14th, 2022. The winery was called Ridgemore Estate, near Niagara on the lake. My daughter drove out from Toronto, where she was doing a 6-month placement at the time. She texted me throughout the day in that careful way she has, giving me information without editorializing, letting me decide how to feel about it. 4:47 p.m. Ceremony was beautiful. Mom looks genuinely happy. 63 guests. 5:30 p.m. Receptions started. Your colleague arrived. I didn't recognize him at first. He fits in completely. Dex welcomed him, shook his hand like he already knew him. 6:08 p.m. My brother gave a toast. Dad, it was really something. He said Dex showed him what it looks like to build something from the ground up without cutting corners. His words. The whole room applauded. I put my phone face down, picked it up again. 6:22 p.m. Your colleague just asked for the microphone. I walked out to the porch. The street was dark, no stars yet. My daughter sent me the video 3 hours later. She didn't describe it first, she just sent the link. It had been posted by one of the guests. 48 seconds in, someone in the background could be heard saying, "Oh God," under their breath. My colleague stood at the microphone, with the ease of a man who has spent decades being believed. He said he wanted to offer some thoughts on what it means to build something that lasts. He said he'd spent his career examining structures that looked sound and discovering where they weren't. He said he'd recently been curious enough to spend an afternoon with Ontario's business registry and the PPSA database, because that's the kind of thing a certain type of person does when they want to understand a foundation. He didn't accuse, he asked questions. I'm just wondering, he said pleasantly to 63 people with champagne in their hands, whether anyone here has looked at the public court filings for the Carmichael Hospitality Group. There's a civil action, Ontario Superior Court, a former partner seeking $280,000. The trial is in October. He paused. I mention it only because I understand some people in this room may have invested in the new Niagara on the lake location, and in my experience, the best time to look at a foundation is before you've committed your weight to it. He raised his glass, to Sylvia, and to the hope that everything is exactly as solid as it appears. My daughter told me later, it took about 40 seconds for the first phone to come out. Then another, then another. Carmichael crossed the room fast. My colleague handed him the microphone back without urgency, thanked the wedding planner, and walked calmly toward the exit. My son stood near the head table, looking like a man watching a building shift on its piers. Sylvia walked out through a side door. My phone rang at 11:48 p.m. Vancouver Island time. I was in bed, not sleeping. I saw her name and answered. She was barely coherent. Not crying. Sylvia doesn't cry when she's angry. The sound she made was something past crying. A controlled fury that had run out of container. You sent him. You arranged this. You are still so after everything. You couldn't just let me. I let her go until the words ran out. Then I said quietly, Sylvia, I'm on Vancouver Island. It's nearly midnight. I don't know who that man was, and I didn't organize anything. But whoever he was, he cited public court records. Maybe the question isn't what I did. Maybe the question is why nobody thought to look. She hung up. I lay in the dark and listened to the water. I didn't watch the full video until the next morning. By then it had 112,000 views. By evening, 400,000. By the end of the week, it had been shared on 3 different Reddit threads, 2 Facebook groups about Canadian consumer fraud, and a piece in a Toronto business news blog that laid out the civil suit in detail. The comments were mostly people saying things like, "This is the most polite destruction I have ever witnessed," and the way he said committed your weight to it. He's an engineer, isn't he? My colleague called me the morning after. He said, "I think that went about as well as could be expected." "Are you all right?" I asked. "I'm 71, he said. "I've been cross-examined by people far more motivated than a restaurateur. I'm fine." What happened after happened quickly. The Ontario Superior Court civil action gained a second plaintiff within 2 weeks. One of the couples from Sylvia's events circle, who had invested in the Niagara-on-the-Lake location. Then a third individual. The original plaintiff's lawyer amended the statement of claim. The Toronto restaurant closed in October, staff given 4 days' notice, wages partially unpaid. The Burlington and Oakville locations followed in November. Carmichael's social media accounts went private, then deleted. A story in the Financial Post named him specifically. The Niagara-on-the-Lake location never opened. Carmichael was charged in December 2022, fraud over $5,000, 4 counts, Criminal Code of Canada. His trial, once delays were accounted for, ran in late 2023. He was convicted on 3 of 4 counts in February 2024. Sentenced to 38 months federal, eligible for day parole after a third. Sylvia's exposure was financial. The SUV Carmichael had gifted her 2 months before the wedding. A $68,000 vehicle, purchased through the corporate account, was named in the civil judgments as a recoverable asset. She was named as a respondent in one of the investor claims. She retained a lawyer. It was resolved eventually, partially at significant legal cost. The Halifax social circle she'd spent years cultivating went quiet in the way that social circles do when one of their members becomes associated with the word fraud. She's living in Ottawa now, near her sister. She's working again, smaller scale. We haven't spoken since that phone call. My son called me in October 2022. It was a Sunday. My daughter was on her usual call, and midway through she said, quietly, "I think you should talk to him. I think he's ready." She patched him in. He sounded like himself for the first time. In a long time, not performed, not managing me. "Dad, the firm put me on review. Because of the wedding video. Because I'm visible in it, standing next to him, giving that toast." He paused. "They cleared me. But it wasn't a good few weeks." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "You tried to tell me. You said check the foundation. I thought you were being bitter. I understand why. I looked it up afterward. All of it. The PPSA filings, the lawsuit, everything. It took me 40 minutes. 40 minutes, Dad, and I would have known." His voice shifted. "I spent my whole career checking whether contractors are who they say they are. With him, I wanted Mom to be right about something. I wanted her to have gotten it right this time. That one landed somewhere in my chest and stayed there." "She wanted that too," I said. We talked for a long time. He asked about Vancouver Island, what I do, what the winters are like, whether I'd made friends out here. I told him about the village, about the engineering association I'd joined as a retired member, about a man down the road who builds wooden boats and lets me watch sometimes. My son laughed at that. A real laugh, not a polite one. He visited in March 2023. We walked the beach at Retrevor for an hour, not saying much of anything, which is the best kind of conversation. On the last morning, over coffee, he said, "I want to come back. If that's all right. The spare room is yours," I said. "You don't have to ask." My daughter came in July. She brought her partner, who I met for the first time. A quiet, careful woman who works in public health, who shook my hand and looked me in the eye, and I thought, this one is solid. My daughter has good instincts. I don't know where she got them. It's September now, 2 years since the wedding. I'm sitting on the same back porch where I took that first Sunday call. The heron is back? Or a heron? I can't be certain it's the same one. The Georgia Strait is doing that silver thing again. My pension and investment income combined comes to just over $66,000 a year. My expenses here run $41,000. I sleep 8 hours most nights. My blood pressure, according to my GP in Parksville, is the best it's been since I was in my 40s. I've taken up woodworking. Nothing as ambitious as boats, but I made my daughter a set of kitchen shelves last spring, and she sent me a photo of them with her coffee mug on them, and I looked at that photo for a long time. I have no bitterness towards Sylvia. I want to mean that, and I think I do. She made choices based on what she wanted, and I made choices based on what I could live with, And here we are on opposite sides of the country with different views out our windows. I hope she's all right. I think she will be. She's resourceful, and she's resilient. And whatever I might say about our marriage, I always respected that about her. My son is doing well. His firm kept him on. He asked me last month if I'd be willing to look at the structural plans for a building his company is considering, as a second set of eyes. Not officially, just a retired engineer's read. I said yes, without hesitating. That felt like something. The lesson I keep coming back to is not a dramatic one. It's the same lesson I learned in the first year of my engineering training, and forgot to apply to my personal life for 31 years. Before you commit your weight to something, check what it's standing on. Public records don't flatter or posture. Numbers don't have reasons to lie to you. And if someone is expanding fast, charming everyone in the room, and discouraging you from asking questions about the details, those three things together are not a coincidence. That's a pattern. I've seen it in construction and I've seen it in people, and it looks the same both ways. My son asked me on that March walk at Rath Trevor if I had any regrets. I thought about it properly before I answered because I owe him that. One, I said. I should have trusted what my body was telling me about 10 years earlier than I did. The rest I'd do the same. He nodded. We walked another 100 meters in the quiet. I think I'm getting better at asking questions before I sign things, he said. That's all any of us can do, I said. Ask before you sign. And never let anyone make you feel foolish for checking. The heron just lifted off the shallows and crossed the strait in a long, unhurried line until I couldn't see it anymore against the water. I'm going to go start dinner. My son is driving up from Nanaimo this weekend. He's been down there for work, and I told him I'd make the lamb stew he likes. It's the least I can do. I spent 30 years making myself small in a house that was supposed to be mine too. I won't spend another day doing that. God gives us a certain number of mornings. I've decided to be present for the ones I have left.